The Centurion Mk. It's a weird looking plane, isn't it? Where's his wings? Join me as I build Vespid's phenomenally good rendition of Australia's battle-hardened, battle-proven main battle tank. As with most overused jokes, this one stopped being funny about 12 videos ago. Not being an aircraft kit, I had no idea where to start, so instead I gawked at the sprues like a blithering idiot and spontaneously combusted out of sheer confusion. They really are nice sprues though, like really nice, like genuinely, I don't think I've ever seen such sharp moulding before ever. After unexploding myself, I took a look at the instructions and started working on the hull. There's one big bit, and then you put two smaller plates on the front and rear which fit just alright. The plates had some weird ejector pin flash on them, but once you actually, look at what you're doing, it's pretty easy to remove, so no big deal. Up next was some suspension-y and running gear adjacent bits. All of the suspension pieces are broken up into 3 parts, but are basically just a spring with some absurdly thin and easy to break arms sandwiched between 2 other parts, and so, while a bit fiddly, are perfectly manageable. There's also like 6 of them to make, but I only recorded doing 1, so if that bothers you, just rewatch this segment another 5 times and you'll get the basic gist. After putting together the road wheels and sprockets, also off camera, I was faced with another dilemma that I was absolutely dreading, and what put me off starting this kit even though I had it in the stash for about a year. The tracks. The ones you get in the box are link and length, which I think are the good ones, but frankly, I've heard people complaining about any and every type of track design, so really I can't be too sure. I wanted to keep them, and ideally the road wheels off of the model in order to ease painting as much as possible, so I looked at a single YouTube video and landed on laying them out on masking tape and gluing them together. I think for how these ones were designed, it wasn't the smartest idea, because they do have pretty defined curves, even the really small links that go around the sprockets, so they were slightly annoying to get glued together. After the glue had slightly set for about 15-ish minutes, I could then attempt to wrangle the tracks around everything else. This was all for naught because this method turned out to be really annoying, and the tracks broke a whole bunch, and also I didn't wait for the road wheels to dry enough so they ended up being glued to the rest of the tank anyways, so I said fucking glue the tracks on anyways, so really it's just the worst of both worlds. The method I should have done, with the results of the method I probably shouldn't have. After that kerfuffle, I forged on with a bunch of the other hull bits, including, but not limited to, the track guards, which are pretty close to the tracks too, so I'm not too sure why I thought doing the tracks separately would be a good idea. Well, from this point on, the general experience was reminiscent of building a model airplane, with the exception of it looking nothing like an airplane. It was noticeably more finicky and tedious than just about any other kit I've built before. Everything's tiny, which would typically be okay because I have objectively perfect 20:1 vision, but unfortunately my fingers, tweezers, the steadiness of my hands, and physics disagree. This is arguably my fault, because it turns out that tanks are rather small compared to airplanes, and I was born with the unfortunate keep everything at the same scale brainworms. However, combined with this kit's liberal usage of photo etch, which is a pig to work with at the best of times, meant that I kind of didn't want to work on it very much, even during the scan opportunities I had during the absurdly busy however many months it's been since the last video. Some bits are also split up into several smaller bits, such as the towing shackles, which are again, very small. I also gave the turret some love, but didn't record it because it was similarly straightforward but also tedious. The deluxe version of this kit, the one I got, does come with a 3D printed mantlet cover to replicate the canvas ones used by Australia during the Vietnam War. It involves some fairly straightforward surgery, which I bungled anyways, but I didn't record it so you'd never know. After building everything up to a point where I figured it wouldn't be a complete and utter inconvenience to paint, I chucked some primer on. In defiance of the laws of tradition, I opted to use Rust-Oleum's 2X Black Paint Plus Primer because A, if everything's covered in black I can just cope and pretend that any unpainted areas are actually artificial shadow or something. B, I doubt there's anyone making a spray can of the correct colour these Centurions were painted, and C, I'm a stingy bastard. While I was a little apprehensive at first with it being a paint plus primer, I reckon it's the exact same stuff as grey primer I've been using all this time. It goes on just as well so long as you apply it correctly, and it's just as durable in terms of both primer to plastic and paint to primer bonds go. On the topic of paint, Australian Centurions were painted so-called olive drab lustreless, which to my knowledge is a true blue fair dinkum homebrew colour that only we used because we're God's specialist country. All of this knowledge is for naught, however, as while there are photos of paint chips up online, they're all a bit useless unless they've been properly scanned and colour corrected and whatnot to make an informed paint match for. And while there are a few brands, including Mk at one point apparently, that had at the very least colours called olive drab lustreless which may or may not be matches, I had to resort to going outside. Puckapunyal Tank Museum was, and as of the time of writing still is closed, but it turns out there's a Centurion in the neighbouring town of Seymour in a very weird configuration that doesn't really represent what I'm building, but to my eye it looked close enough to Vallejo model colour olive drab, or at least the 5-year-old bottle of it I have anyways. Not satisfied, I went on a week-long trip to Canberra, specifically to go to the Australian War Memorial and nothing else. I stared at this tank for 5 solid days, it's true, trust me. But yeah, Vallejo olive drab. Otherwise, painting wasn't too bad. There's a lot of detail and greeble bits, so each coat took a lot longer than my usual 3 swoops of a flat brush, but for the most part, I was able to cover most of everything that needed to be green, paint the road wheels a decent rubber colour, and then paint the tracks black, and then dry brush them with gunmetal, which probably isn't accurate, but I thought it would look nice. There is of course picking out the bits here and there, but it's a tank. It's 90% green. In another episode of Culture Shock, the decals. The kit comes with 5 schemes in the box, although the decal sheet is bloody tiny on account of no scheme using more than around 9 decals in total. The first of these is 2-1 Charlie. Involved in the Battle of Bin Ba in 1969, this tank would take an RPG round to the turret, severely injuring the crew commander and the loader, but fortunately not killing anyone. If you want to hear a more detailed recount about this particular incident, the Australian War Memorial has a brilliant article interviewing Roy Dodd and Ray Collins, the gunner and driver respectively. The second of these is 3 Charlie, also known as Pussy Eater. This picture shows it escorting an APC to Long Hai, but as for what else it got up to during the war, who knows? It's honestly a bit difficult to find photos of specific Centurions, much less any actual information. Third, and the one I went with, was 3-1 Bravo. Unlike the 4 other schemes, this one depicts a Centurion during the first year of deployment to Vietnam, 1968, and as such may or may not be the most accurate to build right out of the box following the instructions to a T, as things such as the smoke launchers on the sides of the turret didn't make it too far. I didn't find this out until after I put the decals on, but hey, it's a happy little accident. The fourth is 4 Charlie, also known as the Very Diabolical, but you wouldn't know that because it's not included on the decal sheet for some reason. This tank is apparently in the care of the Australian War Memorial, with all of its original field modifications still intact, but it's evidently not the one currently on display. Lastly, 2-4 Alpha, known as Buku Boom Boom 2. This was a replacement for the original Buku Boom Boom, a tank that also participated in the Battle of Bin Ba, but then hit a landmine shortly thereafter. Funnily enough, the second Buku Boom Boom also hit a landmine. I mainly opted to go with 31 Bravo because I had all of 4 decals to apply, and I figured I'd let all the rest of the greeble bits and subsequent weathering do all the talking as far as visual interest goes. I also put the decals directly onto the paint without any sort of gloss varnish beforehand because I am the absolute governor. I did decide to do my weathering over a coat of matte, which may or may not have been a mistake because nothing blended quite like what the other YouTube videos I saw, but fuck it, we bowl. The first step was a nice dark wash to add some artificial shadow and bring out all the detail on the greeble bits. Just black and burnt umber oil paint, pretty standard, pretty familiar. The next step was adding some dust effects. Basically, just going a bit hog wild with some buff oil paint, really. The running gear got something vaguely resembling a wash, although I think I probably could have gone a bit thinner as I think you're looking for more of a filter than a wash, but whatever. The hull and the turret got a bit more of a dry blending sort of thing, and a bit of a stipple with a brush lightly dampened in white spirits to make any excess look slightly less vulgar and offensive. Lastly, some mud. I opted to do this with PVA glue, some pastels, baby powder, and paint. You could probably nix the pastels, they didn't seem to do much, but the baby powder did a decent job at thickening things up and making it look vaguely like mud. It probably could have been a bit redder, like it was in the beginning, although it did look kind of ridiculous that way. Also still not 100% sure about the overall effect, however, I was hesitant to use actual dirt like I've seen suggested, but who knows, maybe next time. Also, because I have nowhere else to really mention it, I wasn't a big fan of the included tow cables in the kit. They're really stiff, so combined with the fact that I was using subpar glue instead of super glue like an idiot, they proved a bit too challenging and I ended up using some thin gauge wire instead. This too was annoying, and the final result looks a bit shit and unnatural, but whatever, that's just how it is now. After weathering, my final act before calling this one complete was making some antennae out of stretched sprue. But finally, after, 4 months, I can finally call something done. Honestly, this is straight up just a good kit. Ignore any and all whinging you heard a few minutes ago, because that's all a skill issue on my end, being my first tank and all. A beginner's kit, this is not. Curiously enough, this kit was damn near everywhere when I was in Canberra, including the Australian War Memorial gift shop, and while I doubt the scenario of mum buying little Timmy a model kit is all too common in this day and age on account of it not being the 1960s anymore, you gotta admit, it is a really funny mental image. I paid around $20 for this kit on special at a local scale modelling show, although one is more likely to find this for a hair over $40, maybe $5 less for the non-deluxe version without the manly cover. For $20, it's a no-brainer and literally the only reason I bought it. For $40, it's also a no-brainer, because from what little market research I've done, just about every other 1/72nd scale tank costs $40 for some reason. In terms of other options for an Australian Centurion in this scale, the only one available is the Ace kit, which possibly costs around $45, although judging by the instructions it has an even more baffling and tedious parts breakdown, with the turret alone, none of the boxes of the mantlet or anything, just the turret, consisting of a whopping 5 parts. Also, judging by an unboxing video I've seen, the parts don't look quite as nicely moulded as this one, but it does seem to build up quite well at least. Still, for the money, the Vespid Centurion is good. Go for it. You have official Hellfire Models permission to spend your hard-earned money on a model kit. Good for you.